What's up, everyone? Welcome into DodgerHeads, presented by DodgerBlue.com, part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network. My name is Jeff Spiegel, joined today by Matthew Moreno, Daniel Starkand. And guys, as the days have passed since the trade deadline, some new details continue to leak out about this Eduardo Rodriguez story. Ken Rosenthal had the latest. Matt, I'll let you kind of break it down, but the short version is that while family reasons has been what has been published to Twitter and social media, it sure seems like this had everything to do with Eduardo Rodriguez and his agent trying to extract a couple more dollars out of this deal.
Yeah, the whole thing has been weird from the very beginning, right? Like when Jeff Passan first tweeted on Tuesday, just a little bit more than an hour before the deadline, that the Dodgers and Tigers had a trade in place, but Eduardo Rodriguez vetoed it. I think everybody, you guys were doing a live show at the time. I was downstairs in the clubhouse with other media. Like everybody sort of looked at each other like, what? Like this doesn't make any sense. And then shortly after, it was said, there was some family factors, and his family was largely behind, staying in Detroit and at the time, it seemed to me like his family was living in Miami and he was in Detroit. But I think now it's become they're comfortable in Detroit and make their off-season home in Miami, I think is what it is, which is all fine. And then, like you said, now, Ken and Dave Roberts and Andrew Friedman both said, look, like, yeah, we would have liked him here, but we're not going to argue with, somebody citing their family as reason they're going to veto a trade. So, okay. And then, as you just alluded to, then Ken Rosenthal this morning has the report that Rodriguez's agent tried to get 1 year and I think at $20 million salary tacked on to his contract, which is fine to me. I mean, look, like he is on a very team-friendly deal had he opted in. And like we kind of talked about in our group thread, I wondered if the Dodgers were asking like, hey, if we make this trade, will you opt in the way, sort of the Rangers did with Max Scherzer before completing that trade. And I think that's fair of the Dodgers to ask something like that. And I honestly think it's fair of Rodriguez and his agent to say, okay, like, yeah, we'll do it, but can you add on, 1 more year and $20 million? I think what we're going to get into is the issue then is, did you not come then because of like, would it have just if the Dodgers had said yes to the 1 year and $20 million, would that have been it? And then, okay, the family concerns are done. They're going to get comfortable in LA now, or, that's where the confusion is for me. And yeah, it's just a crazy situation.
Daniel, here's the part from Rosenthal's article I like the best. He said, Rodriguez's agent, Gene Matos, indicated in a statement that the pitcher did not want to disrupt his wife and children, who are based in Miami and comfortable living in the Detroit area. If that alone was Rodriguez's reason for declining the trade, his decision would be difficult to question, even if his stay in Los Angeles might have only lasted a few months. Rodriguez spent 2 months on the restricted list last summer dealing with a marital issue. However, according to team sources briefed on the discussion, Rodriguez and Mato asked for financial and contractual enhancements for the pitcher to join the Dodgers, one of the 10 teams he's contractually permitted to block a trade. When those enhancements were not granted, he invoked his no trade protection. They went on to say what you said, that the sources say that they were asking for an additional year at $20 million if he declined to opt out. So that's the piece to me that it's like, again, the family thing is fine, but if it's family reasons, then you're just saying no. You're not saying, well, we can be convinced for $20 million. I think that's the part that just feels a little dirty to me, Daniel.
Yeah, I agree. And I agree with what Matt said too. I was a little confused when they, all the reports were saying that his family was in Miami, because it's not like Detroit is right next to Miami or anything. But I think now that his family's in Detroit, it makes a little more sense. But I'm with you. If $20 million was getting him to leave, then the family wasn't, the family stuff wasn't really the issue at hand here. And I think it gives a little more clarity into the statement that his agent put out yesterday, which I think was a little confusing at first, because he had mentioned that they talked to the Dodgers and weren't able to work it out. And everyone was kind of confused at like, what was there to work out? Like, the trade was done. It was just a matter of him waiving it. So I think the fact that, they were trying to get that extra $20 million tacked onto his contract, I guess that makes a little more sense. To me, I still think the ultimate reason that he didn't do this is because, to me at least, this hasn't been said anywhere. I think it's because he just wants to pitch in the AL Central the rest of the season, where he has done really well this year. I think if you look at his numbers, he's been really good against the AL Central and slightly above average against everyone else. But if he if he's planning on opting out this winter, which it seems like he's gonna, then you can't really say the Detroit thing, is why you wanted to stay, because you're going to be gone in 2 or 3 months anyway. So I really think he just wants to pitch against weaker competition the rest of the year, finish the season with really good stats, and then go into free agency, as opposed to coming to LA, a big market where there's a lot of attention on you, and you could be potentially risking some of that money with poor postseason performance or whatever the case may be. So I ultimately think that was the main reason. No one will ever say that. But I'm in agreement with you guys. I think the family thing is an easy thing to say where no one could really question it. And I do understand that was likely part of it. But I do think there were a lot of factors at play here, and it's really unfortunate. And I think kind of everyone is to blame here, that the fact that negotiations got as far down the line as they did, that should have never happened.
Yeah, the other piece that came out yesterday was that all of the Dodger players who texted Rodriguez, whether it's Peralta, who played in the World Baseball Classic with him, or Mookie Betts and J.D. Martinez, all of them got ghosted. He responded to none of their text messages, and which is just another just like super bizarre thing. But you kind of hinted. I wanted to ask two more questions, and I'll go to this one first because you referenced it, Daniel. When it comes to who's at blame for this, as I continue to read this, I think there are three parties involved. There's Rodriguez / his agent as party number one, the Detroit Tigers number two, and the Dodgers number three. I think that the Dodgers are while at fault, the least at fault of the three parties based on everything. And there have been reports saying major league executives around the league say, hey, this is on the Tigers to figure this out. If your guy's not going to waive his no trade clause, you are the one that is responsible for knowing that. It sure seems like the agent, his reputation may not be the most awesome reputation around the league. It sure sounds, like I said, like there's a little bit of trying to extract every last penny out of a situation where maybe it would have been best to just like let things happen. So again, Andrew Friedman deserves some blame for thinking this was going to be smooth and not finding out until it sounds like the night before the trade deadline that this wasn't going to work out. But Matt, do you agree with that the Tigers and Eduardo Rodriguez, his agent, deserve most of the blame, and that while the Dodgers deserve some, it's maybe the smallest piece of that pie?
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I don't know necessarily what the percentages would be if it's, like 50% on the Tigers and then 25 to, the agent and the rest of the Dodgers. But however you want to break it up, I think the Dodgers certainly are last on that list. And that being said, I do think, and I know you're not giving them a free pass, and none of us are here, in the sense that at some point there should have been like a direct question, like, hey, he's going to waive his no trade. Like, we're on that list. That won't be an issue, right? Like it shouldn't have necessarily been so taken for granted, I guess, or just assumed. I think obviously admittedly it is easier to say that. Hindsight is 2020, because the Dodgers, Andrew Friedman said he couldn't remember being in a situation like this. And yeah, like I would agree, you would ask anybody, hey, do you think whether it's Eduardo Rodriguez or player X, would they not waive their no trade clause to leave the Tigers for the Dodgers? Like, I think we all would say absolutely they would. But yeah, I think the Tigers definitely need to take the majority of the blame here. And before we move on to, I just want to applaud Daniel. I know he's upset Pirate fans in the past with his trade proposals, and now he just came for an entire baseball division by saying Rodriguez wants to beat up on the entire AL Central.
Well, he looked at Ryan Yarbrough, new Dodger Ryan Yarborough's stats against the AL Central and everybody else. It's about a 5-run differential between the two. So I think he's on to something. And to your point, Matt, Andrew Friedman apparently did talk to the agent. I don't think he ever talked to Eduardo Rodriguez. So that's the weird part, is that it's like, it sure seems like they got whatever assurances they needed, or Andrew Friedman was dumb enough to literally never ask the direct question. And I mean, I know which of those two I'm going to believe to be more likely than the other. Let me ask one last question, Daniel. I'll come to you with this one first. If Rodriguez was asking for an extra year at $20 million to be tacked on, it would basically mean, assuming that was a guarantee that he was going to opt into it, that would be 4 years and $69 million is what he would end up signing for. Part of me thinks that's not a terrible deal for a guy like Eduardo Rodriguez and for an organization that needs pitching. I know it's probably a longer commitment than the Dodgers wanted to make, but knowing you would get him for this year and this postseason run and how limited the options were, and then he opts into 4 years and $69 million, would you have been interested in that?
I think, as always, it would depend on what you would be giving up, and that's kind of the one piece of this that we never got, and we may never get. I would assume if that was in talks, that the Dodgers would have been giving up a pretty significant package, and if that's the case, then yeah, I would like to have him long term as opposed to just being a rental. As far as Rodriguez, the pitcher, that's probably fair market value, but I still think I'd rather. I would have rather saved that money for this winter. If you don't land Ohtani or some of the other big names, then Rodriguez is probably still going to be a free agent. So you could turn and offer him a similar type contract if you want. But for me, I still think, I think that money could be best used elsewhere. He's got like a career ERA of around 4. I know he's having a career year in the AL Central. I'm not going to go too much deeper into that, but I think that has definitely played a role in his big year this season. So I think, if considering the package was agreed to and it would have been a significant package, I think I would have preferred to get him being around long term if that's the case. But overall, I probably wouldn't have done a deal with that significant of a package for a pitcher who's, in my opinion, not anywhere near ace level. So honestly, the fact that it didn't happen could end up being a blessing in disguise for the Dodgers. The disappointing part for me, and why, going back to the blame thing, why I believe the Dodgers deserve some blame, is because the fact that they weren't able to really get anything done after this deal went through. That's where the blame goes to the Dodgers. For me, I'm in agreement with you guys that the Tigers and the agent deserve most of the blame, for this deal not being able to go through. I think we look at everything through a Dodgers lens. We don't, look at it from the other team's lens. And if you're the Pirates, the Tigers, I still got the Pirates on my mind. Thanks, Matt. If you're the Tigers and you're a Tigers fan right now, I would imagine you're more pissed off than the Dodgers are, because this is a guy who's probably going to be a free agent this winter. He's already been offered a qualifying offer, so you can't even get a draft pick for him. And now you're probably not going to get nothing for him. And that was your best trade asset, and you're a rebuilding team. So I think overall, I think the Tigers, I keep saying Pirates, the Tigers deserve most of the blame here. But to me, the disappointment with the Dodgers is just that they weren't able to pivot and get another high impact starting pitcher, which is what we know they've needed.
Well, Matt, that's just because they knew that Lucas Giolito was going to go out and give up 9 earned last night. Dylan Cease was going to give up 7 earned, while our guy Lance Lynn was out here throwing darts. So, I think maybe the Dodgers are just dodging strategic bullets everywhere, right, Matt?
Yeah, completely agree. Daniel called it. The Dodgers may have gotten the best White Sox starter at the deadline. Real quick, also, I think to Daniel's point, another factor could have been, if the Dodgers were going to be responsible for another $20 million at the end of the contract, they may have been looking at it as, okay, like that's a bigger financial commitment from us. Yeah. We don't want to necessarily send as many prospects as we were going to potentially give you if it was only the 3 years. So yeah, there's so many layers to this, and it's such a unique situation to begin with that it's, like I said at the beginning of the video, like it's just kind of crazy.
Yep, it's a bizarre situation, and who knows? Maybe this is the last we hear of it. It feels like maybe all the reporting that's going to be done on this has been reported. I hope, because it will only get more bizarre if there's more to come. So let us know what you guys think in the comments below. Are you glad that the Dodgers dodged this bullet? Would you have done an extra year at $20 million, to Daniel's point, presumably for less of a prospect cost? I think it's an interesting question, and who deserves the blame here? How much blame do you place on Andrew Friedman? These are all the questions that we're left to answer. That's Matt Moreno. That's Daniel Starkand. My name's Jeff Spiegel. Check out DodgerBlue.com for all the latest. Check out DodgerBlue1958 on social media. And of course, if you're a podcast person, Apple, Spotify, Google, search for DodgerHeads. We'd greatly appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of your day. And as always, go Dodgers.